A reserve officer in the IDF spokesperson's unit, Rachel Lester. She joins us now. Rachel, we appreciate your joining us on the program today.
Hi, I'm happy to be here. Thanks for having me.
Yes, and I'd like to get your thoughts on, how you feel about those airstrikes, which have been condemned by a number of countries. We're seeing the protests everywhere, in Madrid, in Paris, in Germany, and so on, because a number of civilians are being killed by these Israeli airstrikes. In the past few days, 400 deaths in a day. That's much more than were killed on that unfortunate day by Hamas militants on the Israeli civilians, which started off this whole war with Gaza.
Okay, let me address a couple of things. Firstly, we have no idea how many civilians have been killed in Gaza because Hamas's numbers are not trustworthy in any way. We all have known from the beginning of the war that it takes way more than one day to count dead civilians or injured civilians. So any number that Hamas has come out with so far cannot be trusted at all. As far as the airstrikes that so many countries are protesting, I want to put it in the context of how did we get here? Because we've had a ceasefire for 2 months that saw Israel releasing over 1,000 Palestinian terrorists for just 33 Israeli hostages, both alive and dead. And the ceasefire was supposed to move on to a second phase, but diplomacy failed. Hamas repeatedly refused to release the rest of the Israeli hostages, and Hamas also rejected every single proposal that they received from the American negotiators. So Hamas made clear that they would rather drag Gaza and all of the civilians that includes into a war zone, endangering all of the lives of the people that they're in charge of, rather than simply free the last 59 hostages. It could have been so simple. And we know that the hostages are being tortured and starved in underground tunnels or forced to be slaves from the hostages that have been released so far. Israel cannot and should not be expected to continue endlessly trying to negotiate after Hamas has made their priorities clear so many times. We had no choice but to go back to the war that Hamas has forced us into. Additionally, the fact that Hamas fired rockets into central Israel today only highlights the fact that they have been using every day of the ceasefire to recruit more members and build more weapons. It would be absolutely insane to let the threat of another October 7th start to grow again on our border. So I think Israel is more than justified in responding to Hamas's complete lack of participation in the peace process with rockets and missiles.
Defense Minister Israel Katz says residents of Gaza need to leave because they will most likely experience more attacks from the Israeli Defense Forces. It says Israel will act with forces you have not yet known. He's asking those who live in Gaza to leave. But wouldn't you need a ceasefire in order to allow for this civilian passage, at least out of Gaza? And then how are you so sure that the people who are leaving Gaza are innocent civilians and not Hamas members?
The beginning of the war, the first several months, included evacuations from the north to the south and then from within the south to other parts of southern Gaza every single day without a ceasefire. It's very clear that we give Gaza notice before we strike in a specific area. It's all over social media and on TV there, and we can expect that they have reasonable ways to get around that don't include a ceasefire needing to be in effect. And regardless, we don't have the choice to continue a ceasefire because Hamas rejected every single ceasefire proposal. It's really not up to us at this point.
Some aid organizations are claiming that, their staff have been hit. The UN did report that at least 2 of its staff had been killed in those Israeli airstrikes. And then you have more people in need of aid in Gaza. There's no aid coming in. There's no one leaving Gaza at the moment. Does Israel consider the humanity of the situation at hand?
I just want to clarify that the UN workers that were tragically killed this week were not killed by the IDF. The IDF did an investigation and put out a statement that it was not an IDF airstrike that killed them. As far as the humanity of the situation, of course, every single thing Israel does is to try to preserve as much humanity as possible. Why else would we be telling Gazan civilians to evacuate before every single airstrike? We want to minimize as many civilian casualties as humanly possible, and it's Hamas's fault that we're in this situation, that we have to be striking them at all. The second part of the ceasefire deal could have been agreed upon if Hamas would just be willing to step down from power and let a peaceful organization take over, and they simply won't. They are putting Gazan civilian lives in danger every single day by refusing to meet the terms of the second phase of the ceasefire deal. So I think instead of asking if Israel cares about the humanity of the situation, you need to be asking, why doesn't anyone care that Hamas doesn't care about the humanity of the situation?
Well, that's because a lot of groups think that Israel is perpetrating genocide in Gaza, and many of those protests, the protesters who are protesting Israel's airstrikes say that they're killing innocent civilians. Do you think these people are being influenced by Hamas propaganda? They probably do not understand the situation on the ground. And is there a way to verify what really is going on the ground, seeing that even journalists like myself and my colleagues in the Middle East are also restricted from certain parts of Gaza to actually determine what is true and what is not?
I can tell you that there's not a simple way to know what's going on the ground, and journalists are being restricted for their own safety, because in a war, we cannot guarantee journalists' safety. As far as the claim of genocide, it's simple slander, because we are in a war that we didn't start and we don't want to be in, and we wouldn't be in if Hamas would simply accept the ceasefire agreements that they've been offered over and over and over. I think that Israel's doing whatever is necessary to continue degrading Hamas's military capabilities and not let them start another October 7th, because that's what they're trying to do. I mean, we had rockets in Israel today. How could we let them continue to rearm and recruit new members while they're, while Israel is sitting on the other side of the border right here?
What do you say to those who think that Prime Minister Netanyahu's recent actions are being egged on by the U.S. President Donald Trump, someone he respects?
I think that it's not my place to comment on the relationship between any other country and Israel, but I think that Netanyahu is doing what he feels is the best case scenario for Israel. And after, again, 2 months of negotiations, we've been backed into this corner. And I'm thankful that we do have U.S. support at this moment.
Rachel, thank you again for speaking with us on The World Today.
Thank you for having me.